Hi, I'd like to welcome each of you to my podcast entitled The Wright Experience. I'm Dr. William T. Wright Jr., the founder and host of this show. First and foremost, this evening, I'd like to say Happy Veterans Day to all of the folks who have served our country in terms of military and their dedicated service to the protection and safety of our great nation. Your service and valor is appreciated and celebrated. Additionally, I'd like to wish my wife, Mrs. Mary Barnes Wright, a very happy and wonderful 32nd wedding anniversary as we celebrate that on this November 11th. Very soon also, I'll be celebrating my 6th year serving as superintendent of Hertford County Public Schools in North Carolina, and my 9th year as superintendent. That celebration will be coming shortly as well. Overall, over these years, I've been fortunate enough to get to know and work with some amazing leaders from all across the United States. The vision of this show is to share these podcasts with you so that we can grow and learn from each other every day. Our focus initially is on educational leaders, and starting in 2022, we will focus on leaders from other disciplines. When you hear something that you like, I want you to do us a favor and give us a comment, click like, and most importantly, if you are a YouTube subscriber, we would love for you to click that subscribe button. I've been absolutely amazed and pleased and ecstatic about everywhere I go now, the amazing response that I've gotten from the invention of this show. I'm absolutely pleased, and by the end of this year, we'll have 40 plus episodes for your viewing pleasure. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. Tonight is episode 36 of the Wright Experience. My guest tonight is one of the longest serving superintendents currently in the state of North Carolina. Additionally, he has the unique opportunity of being the educational leader in his home district. I first became acquainted with this gentleman when we both served on the executive committees, executive board of the North Carolina Schools Superintendents Association, representing our respective regions a few years ago. He is a very strong advocate for public education, and the two of us could often be seen fighting, not with each other, but against the cause for better outcomes for during our time on the executive board. My guest is Dr. Jeff McDaris. Dr. Jeff McDaris began his teaching career in 1983 after graduating from North Carolina State University with a bachelor's degree in industrial arts education. He taught and coached students in 2 other North Carolina systems before returning to Transylvania County in 1997. In Transylvania County, he taught middle school students and coached on the high school level before becoming an administrator in 1998. Dr. McDaris earned his master's degree in industrial education from Western Carolina University in 1993. He is also a graduate of the Principal's Executive Program at UNC Chapel Hill and earned his doctorate in educational leadership from Western Carolina in 2005. He is a former trustee for Blue Ridge Community College and served on the Mountain Area Workforce Development Board for 17 years. Jeff serves on the North Carolina Superintendents Association's executive board. He's still up there, and is a member of the board of directors for the North Carolina Association of Supervision and Curriculum Development. He's a 2011 recipient of the Peak Performer Award at Western Carolina University and a 2017 recipient of the William and Ida Friday Award from the Friday Institute at North Carolina State University for Innovation. He currently serves as the regional and state committees for the My Future NC initiative and on the board of the Brevard Transylvania Chamber of Commerce. Dr. McDaris was a co-chair for the Remote Learning Task Force of the North Carolina Superintendents Association. He's a native of Transylvania County and the 1979 graduate of Brevard High School. Jeff is married to his sweetheart, high school sweetheart, Lisa. He and Lisa have 2 sons, John, who is a middle school principal in Henderson County Public Schools, who is married to Charity. He's got 2 awesome granddaughters, Madeline and Ava. and a third grandchild on the way. And also William, who works in the private sector, is Dr. McDaris' son, is in Buncombe County in the private sector, and he's married to Rebecca, who is a teacher in Buncombe County Schools. And at this time, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome my friend and colleague, Dr. Jeff McDaris. Welcome to the Wright Experience.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here, and happy anniversary.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. 32 years, and my wife deserves a gold star in heaven. I'll just say that.
I understand what you're saying. I tell people all the time, I married up, and I freely admit that. I'm glad I did.
Absolutely. Well, welcome to the Wright Experience, Dr. McDaris, and I'm ecstatic. I've always been an admirer of your work and your leadership, and just excited to have you on the show.
Well, I'm excited to be here. It's really an honor. One of the things that we can't forget is we rely on each other,
That's right.
Particularly superintendents.
That's right.
Not millions of us out there. There's only about 115, 116 of us, and we have the same problems in different locations, and we understand what's going on, and we're fighting the good fight for education.
Absolutely. So, Dr. McDaris, we're going to get into the questions tonight. Want you to begin, if you will, by talking to us. Please begin by telling us about Transylvania Schools and the amazing outcomes that are being created for students there.
Well, thank you. We're a system that, like every other system, we're trying to embrace some of the new things with reading. For many years, I will tell you, our system did well in reading. We still look like we're doing well, but I would say that until we reach a point where all of our students are reading well, then we haven't arrived. And the science of reading, we're embracing that, trying to get into that a little bit more. I'm in a system where when I grew up, there were 3 large manufacturing plants here, 2 of them very large. Much smaller county, and we had probably about 4,700 students in our schools. We now have about 3,300 students in our school system, and the plants are gone. That's not a coincidence. It has affected a lot of things. We're in a beautiful area of the country, of our state, just like you are, and because of that, we have a number of retirees. They're wonderful. Many of them volunteer in our schools, and they do some great things. We're glad to have them, but we do not have the younger families that we once did. I think our county is the third. We flip back and forth between second and third place on the average oldest age in the county, in the state.
Oh, wow.
And so it's a challenge. A lot of our land is U.S. and state forest land. We have the French Broad River begins here, the headwaters, and so there's limited land. And you add to that the cost of it's expensive and keeps going up. It's something that we're working on. We're looking to partner with people about affordable housing. We want families to be able to stay here. About 30% of my workforce lives outside the county now. Most of them over toward Henderson and Buncombe, where they can find, it's expensive there, but not as expensive here. And they can find a little bit more variety of where they want to live. And so, these are challenges that we know we embrace, but at the same time, we have 3,300 kids, and those 3,300 are very important to us. We want them to be very successful. We work with them every day, and when we have some that falter just a little bit, we're there to try to help them pick back up. The pandemic, of course, has been tough for all of us, and that has caused its own challenges. But I will say the term learning loss is not something that I really believe has happened for any of us.
Sure.
I know it hasn't in Hertford County either. It might be learning delay, and maybe they haven't learned as much as fast as they would have normally, but it's not learning loss. They've learned during this. We've just got to try to pick up the pace.
Yeah, and it's different learning.
Yes.
We have kids, students, and I'm sure you guys do too, who, for whatever reason, ended up having to learn how to work to provide income for the family because mom may have lost her job. Well, that's learning. That's learning. I mean, it's
It
learning.
is learning. It is learning. You know, I went during the, I guess it was a few months ago, we were doing some remote days. I went down to our local grocery store to pick up something, just to pick up something for lunch.
Sure.
I saw a couple of our students in there. They were working, and they looked at me and they were a little surprised. I know they thought they were in trouble because they were supposed to be doing remote learning that day, but they were working. But, you know, we talked, I understand the situation. They're trying to help their families out. So we try to work with them, and I encouraged them to try to make that work up maybe in the evening. But it's been a challenge for everyone.
Absolutely. And certainly those are the times that we've been presented. So Dr. McDaris, you have served as superintendent in your home county for more than a decade. I've looked up the statistics, so it's been more than a decade. So what things do you attribute to that success?
Well, I think it's a variety of things. You know, I think you have to have that passion and love for your schools. I
Right.
wouldn't be here if it were not for what these schools did for me. You know, I tell people very often there's a blessing and a curse to be a superintendent where you grew up. The blessing is you know a lot of people, and the curse is you know a lot of people. And you know, but that's good. You know the inner workings. You know, there's different parts of the county that look at things differently. We have two comprehensive high schools. They're in different classifications, but they're rivals not just in athletics, but they're rivals in academics and in other areas. But at the same time, they'll all they all play little league together or go to church together, so they all know each other. And it's important to know how the community works. I think it's important to try to know a little bit about the history and culture of the community, whether you've been there your whole life or whether you've been there for a day. I think it's important to learn that because it really gives you some background experience, or at least a framework of why certain things are maybe laid out the way they are, designed the way they are. It also is helpful to be able to call upon people who you know share the same passions, and you know, I guess growing up around many of them, that they understand that it is important, and that it is a vested interest in our students' well-being.
Right. And that's really what these jobs are all about, is improving outcomes for students. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Dr. McDaris, even before the pandemic, I remember vividly hearing you speak often about the instructional technology integration that your district had engaged in, which gave somewhat of an advantage, I guess, to you all when you made the transition to virtual. So what lessons did you learn that were helpful, and then what did you learn that you did not know already?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you. We started virtual days in our system long before the pandemic. Part of that was rooted in the fact that we were talking to students who were going to college, community college, workplace, military, and they were seeing increasing amounts of online training and instruction. And so we felt like, you know, if this is something that we are going to, if we're really preparing our students for the future, then we need to embrace that. We also have winter weather up here in the mountains, and it can be a challenge. Parents make plans long range. They don't like to, you know, go. They don't like to lose spring break. They don't like Saturdays. They don't like adding days in the year because that's family time. It's important, and we respect that. So this offered us an opportunity to have learning in a situation where it never stopped. You know, and so we have tried to perfect that. We're still trying to perfect that, quite frankly. One of the things we learned from the pandemic is sort of an old Baldridge adage: the more you know, the more you realize you didn't know. And you have to continue to try to improve that. And we all, I am the most guilty of all. We all can sometimes get a little not really complacent. It's like, okay, I think I've arrived where I am on understanding this, Google Classroom or whatever. And you'll lose your skills if you don't keep that going. It's nothing virtual will ever replace a teacher. It shouldn't. Their art and craft is so important, but what we want to do is to equip them with the tools that help that art and craft. And during the pandemic, when it first started, admittedly, we were probably ready to pivot faster than many others. We hit the ground running within 2 days, and students, it seemed normal to them. It seemed like a snow weather event, and that was very good. The challenge that we encountered very quickly, you have to realize, everybody did, was that even though we were ready, our snow events might last a week at the most, usually 3 or 4 days. We weren't equipped to hit the ground running for 6 months.
Right.
So we had to, or 3 months that first year, but we had to regroup a little bit. And what we've learned is that the engagement that you do is so critically important. Students can check out, not intentionally, but they can, they lose connection. That connection is so very important. We've seen a rise in social emotional concern. We've seen a rise in mental health issues. We had an extremely challenging start of the school year this year with catastrophic flooding. And then we had 2 students that unfortunately took their lives. And so, what we realize is that even when you do remote learning, no matter how much you do it, students need that connection, and you've got to reach out. And sometimes that means you make home visits.
That's right. And these jobs, Dr. McDaris, you've been doing it 12 years. I think I read, and I think this is my 9th year total. And yet, these challenges that we're facing now, these opportunities, I'll call them, that we're facing, are certainly opportunities that there's no playbook for. It wasn't planned or anything of that nature. Yet we're making it happen because we know that we need to do that for the best interest of children. So you're to be commended for rolling your sleeves up and doing what needs to be done for students and those who serve students. We have to make sure that we remember that that these staff members that we have that are serving children every day certainly need to be cared after and looked after as well. So
they do, and it's so important to take care of themselves.
That's right.
I'm not really sure how I got into this, but we have some colleagues, as you all know, that are out there, and they talk each day about self-care, and they're doing these different exercises. I sort of got in with that group. I don't know how to get out now. I think I'm trapped, but we do that. But our good friend Tony Jackson, I think, put it best one time when he and I were talking. We've got, all of us, we've got to take care of ourselves, and we've got to continue to encourage our folks to take care of themselves, because we're the only ones that will do it. And, it's what we preach, and it's just something that we've got to remember to practice, because it's a stressful job. It's the most rewarding job anyone can have. You know that so deeply. We love it.
That's right.
But it's stressful.
That's right. So what have you enjoyed most about the superintendency?
I think probably the thing I've enjoyed the most is being able to implement some things such as our virtual days and others in a manner that I feel like are helping students. And I talk to my colleagues in the West frequently, and I'll tell them, when we were doing virtual days early on, I want any of you that want to steal any ideas. It's not stealing. That's something we do in education well. We share.
That's right.
Please do it, because they're going to end up taking something that I've done, all of us out there, and they're going to do it a little better, and that way I can learn back.
That's right.
And I've got some colleagues up here that are doing some remarkable things that make me envious. But that's been rewarding to try to do that. And then the other thing, it's going to sound like a kind of a canned response, but it is sincere what I'm about to say. And if I have a disciplinary hearing with a student who is trying to struggle to make the right choice, I will bring this up, and that thing that I bring up is this. There was a time in my county where if you dropped out of school, you wouldn't have been able to say you can't get a good job. You could have gone and worked in the mills. And we, at one time, my county had the highest blue-collar wages in the state of North Carolina. And it all went away. And I tell those students now that it's a big deal when you walk across that stage and you get to shake my hand and you get a diploma from your principal. It makes me happy. It thrills me. It makes your family happy. But it's a big deal because that piece of paper says that you have finished something and that you are academically ready to go to that next step, whatever it is. You're not finished. Learning never stops, but it's ready to go to the next step. So I would say that that's another one of my most rewarding things is to be on. I got the best seat in the house, when they walk across that stage. And then I'll throw this in. If you're ever having a bad day, and you know this one, if you're ever having a bad day, go visit a kindergarten class. I helped them with lunch yesterday at one of our elementary schools. They seemed to like my haircut. They were rubbing my head, some of them, but you can't go find that kind of happiness anywhere else.
That's right. Absolutely. So, Dr. McDaris, I know that I've been waiting to ask you this question. I know that you have ties with the NCASCD. And so moving forward, what curriculum changes or enhancements, in your opinion, need to be made to provide optimum learning environments for children moving forward?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. Every discipline is very important. They all interact. Certainly, reading is the most critical. If you are a good reader, then you're going to be able to do better in science and social studies in all areas. And I think if and I still don't know if I can wrap my arms around it, but we've got to do some things with kindergarten and pre-K. Pre-K is not really part of NCASCD, but we know that foundation is so important. We've got to work on the reading foundations. We've got to look at each discipline and try to determine the literacy in each discipline. I was very privileged to join you and your colleagues in Northeast RESA recently for a fantastic conference. I'm trying to talk my brothers and sisters in the West to ride down there with me. Dr. Donyal Dickey was talking about that. He was talking about it, and it was right there. I wanted to hear it. And he hit it home run. And he talked about how as you're trying to work with students to get them to learn reading, literacy, the concepts behind the construction of our language, it's not just an English thing. It's not just a reading thing. It's in all disciplines. So I think you're going to see more and more of a focus with North Carolina ASCD in that area because it's going to affect all the other areas, I think, positively.
And it's so desperately needed. This is the time for us to reevaluate, step our game up, whatever we want to call it with regards to curriculum. If we don't get it done now, there's no better time than now for us to do that. So.
And you're right. We have such an opportunity right now to redesign what we're doing in education. We learned a long time ago that maybe sitting students in straight rows of 6 or 7 is not always best. And but our schools are still largely designed like they always were. We're trying to get some new buildings here. I think what you're going to see in the future is the better use of blended opportunities for students, but at the same time, bring them into those schools for those social emotional connections. Those are all things that we have a wonderful opportunity right now coming out of the pandemic to really look at. I will say this, all learning is important. Certainly, performance is critical, and I don't question that. But, if I ask somebody, what did you make on your midterm in your 7th grade algebra test? If they were one of the students in pre-algebra, rather, they may not remember that, or maybe it's general math. They may not remember that. But I'll tell you what they'll remember. They'll remember that teacher that they knew loved them, cared for them, really wanted them to work, and could really push them hard, and they made them feel good about what they were learning. So we can't overlook that aspect. It's not just performance and growth. That's all very important. But it's also those social emotional relationships, because I tell people here when I speak to new teachers, your first job is to make them feel safe. Your second job, part of your job, is to make them feel like they're cared for and loved. And then if you do those first two, then you can teach them.
Amen. Amen, brother. That's right. That's right. And so critical. That's so critical in our development moving forward. Absolutely. Dr. McDaris, all across our state and nation, we're experiencing unprecedented issues with recruitment and retention of employees. And this used to be, and this used to be an isolated problem, but now it's affecting all districts, but also all positions. So what steps need to be taken and by whom, in your opinion, to fix this challenge?
Well, I think we have a great opportunity. Obviously, the Leandro case has been in our news lately in North Carolina.
Right.
We know that's going to be a big deal, and I don't know when that will be resolved. I've heard the judge's ruling, but probably going to be some challenges to that. I do think that, whether intentionally or not, I'm a well-funded system overall. I freely admit that. Part of it's because of our property taxes.
Right.
We have property that's considered highly valuable here on mountainsides. I don't know. Sometimes they put homes in places I don't know that I would, but they like the views.
Right.
But at the same time, even with that, I have a high poverty rate among my children. So there's a real disconnect. The gap is widening. Right. And we know that it's widening everywhere. And so I would say that part of the recruitment retention issue would be working with everyone to redevelop that level of respect for the position. No one ever went into teaching because they thought they were going to get rich. They went into teaching because it's something that was a passion in their heart. And we've got to rekindle that passion in the heart among our young people to let them know. I would love to see the North Carolina Teaching Fellows expanded back to beyond what it used to be many, many years ago. I'm thrilled that we're starting to see that going into our historically black colleges, but I would like to see it in a lot more of all of our UNC schools and private schools. I'd like to see that expanded because, that's an opportunity. I have a son who is a North Carolina Teaching Fellow, and he had an opportunity to go in some other fields, and he chose that because he was passionate about working with other young people. And so I think one of the steps that we can do is to re-examine what are we doing as a society to try to recruit our most vital workers in terms of preparing our students for the next level. And it's a multifaceted approach, but I think we've got to try to do that. And we've got to try to recruit more students out there who may not think that they're the type to teach, but they're really good working with young people. We need to recruit more students of color. Teachers of color. That is a challenge for my area. When the plants closed, I lost a lot of diversification in my county. And students need that because that's the world we're going to be working in. Those are just some things, considerations that we need to keep right front on our radar as we rebuild the numbers for our profession. It's critical everywhere. I'm fortunate to get some positions. I guess people have moved in, tried to escape larger urban areas. But at the same time, I had positions where I once would have 10 applicants. I might have one.
Wow. Yeah. And it's drying up for all of us. And we've got to have all of the things that you just mentioned are absolutely critical. And in addition to that, people have got to talk positively about the work that we're doing. And I don't know about in the West, but in the eastern part of the state, we've got you mentioned the word respect. There has to be a renewed respect for our profession. I mean, we've got to have that. In addition to all the other things, we got to have that renewed respect. So, absolutely,
the hardest job you'll ever love.
That's right. That's exactly right. Dr. McDaris, if you had the opportunity to advise a current education professional about the superintendency and aspirations to attain one, what would you tell them?
Well, I would tell them one of the things is, try to develop your professional network. There's no shame or harm in reaching out to colleagues, even outside your own system, to learn, building those collegial relationships, hearing their stories, what would you do in this situation? That's the way you do it. You build that rapport, you build that level of experience. None of us, I'm in being a career technical background person. I admire all occupations, and I myself have done all sorts of things. As a lake attendant, cleaning out bathhouses, I've done it all.
Right.
And so I have a value for all occupations. But let's be realistic. You go to school to be a lawyer. You go to school to be a doctor. You go to school to be a lot of different things. You don't go to school to be a superintendent. You might go to school to be an educator.
Right.
But once you are an educator, then you build those experiences, rapport, and those relationships to where you learn how to handle situations and be in position to be a superintendent. You never get out of the classroom. It's just that your classroom has now grown much larger. And so I would tell people to remember your roots as far as the classroom you taught and how you work with young people, each one of them. But at the same time, you've got to reach out to those colleagues. You might not be able to go to every conference, but I know that when there's regional opportunities at our REISs, for example, or at NCAT or anything like that, I really encourage you to take advantage of those, because that's how you build that inner knowledge that you just can't replicate in a regular college classroom. It's got to be through experience and trial by fire.
What awesome wisdom, and that's why I wanted to throw that question in there, because I knew you would talk those great words of wisdom for our listeners, and I appreciate that. Dr. McDaris, that really exhausts my questions. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience that might be helpful?
I would just say, first of all, thank you for having me on. It really is a true honor to interact with colleagues across the state, because we're all need to be reminded that we're all fighting the good fight. I would just, tell everyone that, none of us here are going to do everything perfectly. But what we're going to do is we're going to try our very best. And I would like to have the public understand that all the issues that you're hearing now, no pun intended, but do your homework. I would say look at what's really going on, and try to be part of the process to help us all, because we cannot teach children without your help. We only have them a few hours every day, and then they go home. And sometimes those homes are great, and sometimes those homes are not great. Right. And so we really are in this together. It takes everybody to educate our children.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Absolutely outstanding, and that's our reality. We need help. We call that in Hertford County Public Schools being all in for learning. And I've sold that concept for 6 years now, that I need everybody, all hands on deck, to do what's needed for children. That's really what this is all about. So thank you for that. If you hold on with me for a minute, we'll come back and close out the show. Dr. McDaris, just hold right there. Always, my guest next week is another superintendent from the western part of the state of North Carolina, who is actually from down east, but now serving as a superintendent in the western part of the state. My guest will be Mr. Dale Cole, who is superintendent of Clay County Schools in North Carolina. He is a fairly new superintendent who's taking the role and doing an amazing job. I look forward to that experience. That'll be next Thursday, November 18th at 7:00 p.m. Dr. McDaris, I want to thank you so very much for being my guest. I've always enjoyed immensely being in your presence, and we certainly had some very interesting discussions during my time on the executive board with you. But it's always been about making outcomes better for children across our state. I just want you to know that I admire and respect your leadership, and I appreciate your willingness to be a part of the Wright experience. And look forward to having you back on here at a later date. And to my audience, I want to thank you for being a part of this podcast. I hope this podcast serves to make us all better. And again, my friend, thank you very much for being a part of it. Thank you all for watching, and good evening.